Hello, everyone. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm sure that the things that I'll be telling you related to where the economy is standing today are not going to be a big surprise. We've been working on this for the last 7 years, and it has been quite refreshing to wake up this morning to the news that finally, for the first time at the biggest UN conference, there's been an announcement that there's going to be a transition out of fossil fuels. It's been an interesting battle to work on sustainability since 2016. I remember the first time when I had a call with an investor, I was thinking, okay, this clearly is an opportunity to educate someone rather than try to expect to get any money out of this. From today's perspective, what has changed is that there's been a lot of interest in the topic, a lot of money that have been fueled in the industry, yet the economy is still looking as it does, which is, I would say, rather unstable if you look at global GDP. 6 years ago, I set myself on a journey to understand what's sitting behind all of the data that explains that the economy is not doing well. But instead of fixating on just the typical financial KPIs, I decided to add a layer that was missing to the assessment, which was the scientific side of things. We have been hearing a lot probably about IPCC reports. We're standing here on the corporate sustainability stage, so I'm sure that many of you are aware. But ultimately, all of this data that has been gathered for decades has been a little bit on the side of how economic decisions have been made. So in 2016, I sat in front of my financial background. I used to work in investment banking, a few other banking type of institutions, fintech, and was a little bit perplexed when it came to the point of understanding that the science has been telling us quite a lot about where the economy was headed, but there was no proper assessment to that. So 2017, I decided to kick off my entrepreneurial journey. From today's perspective, we are 150 people based across Europe, just open up Scandinavia, have a big office and fast-growing one in London, HQ in Berlin, Munich, and a few other places like Paris. And what we decided to work on in 2017 was climate risk, something that very few people know, as in our industry, especially in the last few years, there's been a lot of talk about carbon accounting and all of this shorter-term data assessment, maybe perspective. The reason why I started with climate risk was because all of the data that I looked at for 2016, 2017 was pointing that we had a big bill to pay if we were starting to assess where our economy was headed and were adding these KPIs related to ESG to the bill. Since then, we've been working with more than 1,500 companies. That has also allowed me to get involved on the board of companies like Chloe, just joined the board of the Ministry of Education of Germany, as well as the external board of BMW. What we've been doing with all these companies is really supporting them on understanding what is the ROI on sustainability. And we have made sure that in this whole process, the holy grail that we're using is science. A quarter of my team is climate data scientists. They come from big institutions like OECD and a few other places. And what they do on a daily basis is really looking into the science and then translating it in something that works as a software as a service platform. The companies that we work with are on a long journey. We have clearly identified that when you start working with a fashion company, you probably should know that there's a bunch of hundreds of suppliers that you would have to be aligning to get them to reduce these like 50 to 70% of emissions somewhere within the scope 1, 2, and 3. When you work with a transportation company like Flix or with an automotive company like BMW, you also need to understand that there's an embedded element of transition thinking that comes through the legislation, because there's bans on combustion engines coming up in the EU. And when you look into the banking sector, you actually have the big responsibility not only to understand your own balance sheet, but also to allow for this transition to be funded in one way or another, and for the decarbonization of the businesses to be supported financially. I always get asked, like, how are you able to work with so many different industries, and why are you working with 1,500 companies for such a short amount of time? It all boils down to the fact that we've answered in the last 6 years 3 questions. One was, what does it mean for a regulator to come and knock on your door and ask for, in the context of CSRD, 1,178 KPIs that need to be assessed within the next 2 years? I see a few hands and heads going up when I say this. This is a true number. The second question that we've worked on answering has been related to the cost of decarbonization. How do you think of this return on investment? Because, let's be honest, I'm sure that you're even listening to some of the presentations here and you're thinking, is there an economic value? Is this something that an investor would support? And the final element, which has been critical even in my own journey, is how do you drive sustainability as a communal team work element that needs to be scaled within an organization, but also within its own value chain. What has resulted out of this effort in answering of these questions has been that we've built a software as a service platform and a data algorithm that is able to predict the values of this ROI for businesses on sustainability and give them a clear pathway on how they can reduce their emissions. We don't stop at emissions, we actually go significantly beyond that, and we have been allowing for some of our clients like KFC or Miracle or Zurich or N26 to process millions of data points a month. And what they do with these millions of data points and why they even need them is because we actually push them to think about sustainability on a daily basis. If they don't, at least on a weekly basis. Because the ESG reporting cycles that might come on a yearly basis once or quarterly because your investors are asking you, in our opinion, after we've crunched the data, don't really matter. And they really don't allow for any business to transition and scale their economic growth within the context of an economy that is not doing so well, plus a context of a planet that is not so healthy. We're supported by some of the biggest and I would say kindest, nicest investors that we have been grateful and honored to start working with for a while now. Since recently, we've brought on board also a bunch of corporates, and the reason for this is that we believe that the transition happens from within, not from the outside. It's great to develop technology, but it's actually incredibly important to allow for these stakeholders to teach you about the biggest challenges that they face. And let's be honest, if you are a bank or a payment processing organization, you have to go through a lot of data crunching to get to the point of knowing what you need to do, but once the regulator calls, you actually have the responsibility to act pretty fast. And digitization is the only way you're allowed to do that. What this group of investors also has allowed us to do is actually expand significantly across our geographies. We've kicked off in Germany, now in also Scandinavia, where we have prominent clients like Philippe Paccard, Gani. We're in France, where BNP, of course, is based, and where they've kicked off. And we have Keen in the Netherlands, Visa in the UK, and also, of course, Lightspeed going even beyond Europe from London. I was hesitating whether I should be telling why we have fixated ourselves so much on science, as this is an investment conference, but I think after these 6 years of existing in this space, for me, it has been critically important to discuss the fact that we need to rely and we need to make the decision, be it in the investment context or in the context of business building growth, of the basis of science. When I found Plan A, I actually spent close to a year reading scientific papers, watching a lot of TED videos, reading pop culture magazines, making sure that I'm understanding and contextualizing really what the problem was. And the good news was that there was a lot of data that can give you context. There was a lot of information that can allow you to understand that we have a problem, but we have the solutions as well. I have the great honor to work with some of the most, I would say, prominent thinkers when it comes to not only science, but also sustainable finance. They have been with us before we had a lot of funding. They've been with us before we had visibility as a company. Michael, he led sustainable finance for Bank of England as an advisor. Martin is one of the heads behind Yale Open Lab, which is the data climate lab of Yale University. Gonzalo is the high-level champion of some of the COPs that have just finished. He also has been chairing that. Kirsten is the CEO of Climate Kick, which is the organization in the EU that allows for sustainable innovation to scale. Professor Jürgen Kropp is part of Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, and Chad is the head behind the Drawdown Project, which is a handbook that anyone can use to identify what solution to fund when it comes to decarbonization. Well, I'm finishing on this note with a few seconds extra, thank you, is because I truly believe that what has happened in our space in the last few years has been a true revolution. The fact that investors are thinking about this not only matters, but it's giving hope, because through digitization we can scale our efforts. The bad news that I will finish off with is that we simply don't have time. And the businesses that we work with, and why they're so prominent, not only for me, but also for their own stakeholders, is because they've understood that by putting money in sustainability, they actually have the possibility to even make more money, because there's still space to be the pioneer. Anyone can decide what position they stay on when it comes to this space. We believe that being on the good side of the history is what matters today. Thank you.